Hi, friends. How's it going? I hope you're doing well. So, today I want to talk about one of the perennial questions of philosophy. In the history of philosophy, there have been core ideas or core questions that have occupied the minds of great thinkers since the beginning of recorded history, and probably uh, from much earlier than that as well. And I say perennial because it's like a perennial plant that springs each season. These questions keep coming back over and over and over again in all times and all places. And the perennial question of philosophy that I want to talk about today is free will versus determinism. Now, I'm going to start with what I think is the best answer first, and then unpack the other elements after. So some people will say that we're determined, that our choices, our life is determined, that it's fated, and that there's destiny. And other people will say that we are completely free and we choose everything that happens to us. The best answer, is that we are both free and determined. And if you can hold these two possibilities simultaneously, then not only does it answer the basic question succinctly, but instead of leading you in rounds and rounds of speculation, it actually opens up the entire um, line of questioning into something that is much more significant. So we could talk about this question for a long time, but I'm going to make it as simple as I can and give you what I believe are the two best arguments for why we are both free and determined. One from determinism, one from freedom, if you will, and you'll see how it opens the questioning up. It's always nice when a question gives you more questions. That's when you know you're kind of on the track towards truth, in my opinion. Okay, so on the determinism side of things, think about how much of your life was out of your control from the beginning. If you were born male, for instance, you will never have a child, give birth to a child. And if you're female, you'll never have a male's experience. I was born in Kentucky, and I'm sure I have a counterpart that, let's say, is born in Lumbini in India. My experience will be so different than their experience. Everything from my genetics to my cultural experience, the language I learned, all of these things are completely different than someone who was born somewhere else. And in that sense, so much of my life is different. It was determined that I was going to learn English as a first language. Because my parents were both teachers that then became lawyers, I was determined to read a lot of books as a child. You could go on and on. And you can actually, if you're strict about it, you could see your life as an unbroken series of events that began with something that you didn't choose. And here, just to head off one of these other sort of possibilities, what if you chose everything before you were born, like outside of time and space, you chose the life? Well, that doesn't really change things because it still suggests elements of determinism that begin things. The ball that started rolling was not chosen by you, and so it moves everything according to those lines of necessity, right? Okay, so you can think of this as the context of your life. And almost all of your choices, almost all of your thoughts, and who you are is embedded within the context of your life. And if you are a strict determinist, if you believe that everything was completely determined, then you probably have a materialist view of reality. You see a first cause that's undetermined as leading to a series of, or a first cause that's completely determined as leading to a series of antecedent causes that are also determined. And by materialist, I mean someone who sees matter as the primary aspect of reality, the first, primary, most important, etc. Well, that I think is the strongest argument for determinism. The context of our life determines so much of who we are, and it's not to be underestimated. But what about the free will side of things? Well, I'm not a materialist at all, but if you are a materialist, if you are a strict determinist, then it actually commits you to a completely ridiculous worldview. And the easiest way, I think, to explain this is that if everything is completely determined, then no one has any agency, and there is no way to blame anyone for anything, and there's no way to praise anyone for anything. Someone who does unspeakable horrors in reality can you really blame them if they were completely determined to do those things? They had no choice. If someone is an absolute saint, completely altruistic, or really does something fantastic in reality, can you really praise them if they were completely determined to do that? If no choice, that they have no choice in the matter? See, strict determinism, I'm saying, cannot be true because it commits you to a worldview that's completely ridiculous. It's like if you had a computer code or you could see it like this. What if you had a computer code that just gave you complete garbage? Well, you know that something is wrong with that code. And of course, you could think that the world is complete nonsense or whatever, and that it's just totally meaningless. But again, this is based on a view that's completely materialistic. On a phenomenological level, on a level of actual lived human experience, we experience ourselves as being agents of choice. We make decisions. Excuse me. We feel ourselves making decisions. And I'm not saying that that necessarily proves that we're free. But if you don't include an element of freedom in reality, in your thinking about the way that the world is, then you get this completely ridiculous worldview where you have no control over anything. And we all know that we can put effort and cause things to happen in our lives. We all know that from direct experience. And we can act like that isn't the truth. But if we do, we just get a worldview that makes no sense whatsoever. So why do I want to talk about this today? Well, a lot of people, when they look at their lives, are extremely brutal on themselves. Why didn't I do that? What's wrong with me, etc. Well, largely speaking, we're more determined than we're free. And we tend to beat ourselves up because we believe that we have way more agency in reality than we actually do. Again, from a genetic level, from a cultural level, a social level, who we are is largely outside of our control. And what happens in the world is largely outside of our control. And so we are generally giving ourselves a lot of anxiety. We tend to, when we're beating ourselves up, for instance, there's no sense in it. It's largely something we didn't choose. Now, on the other hand, again, this is just an example to show how holding both possibilities simultaneous is a type of solution. On the other hand, if you don't recognize that there is some degree of choice, some degree of free will in your life, then you are completely a ship without a rudder, cast upon the sea, only subject to the whims of nature, just complete, no rudder, right? No way to steer reality. And that's a ridiculous way to live your life. And if you do live your life that way, then it will lead to an absolute disaster. And we all experience ourselves making choices. And if you don't see it that way, you won't be able to steer yourself in the direction you want to go. Anyway, that's my introduction to the idea of free will and determinism. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.